Previously on Stay in Your Lane.
A lot of the problems are still the same, but there's been a lot of regulatory requirements. And quite frankly, if you've ever heard me speak on it, I say it never should have been called the FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. It should have been called the Food Documentation Act. There was nothing modern about it. Interesting enough, just read a report in Newsweek, February 22nd. They're actually, in 2018, we had 118 recalls. And just in the almost 2 months of that February 22 was over 50. So we're on pace for probably a record-breaking year if it continues on like this.
Well, I think that the industry is going to head that way. From what you're saying, it's required by January of 26.
Correct. And there are when you look at, people will pay for regulatory compliance because they have to.
What if you're fully integrated?
If you're fully integrated and you can get that, I just don't know unless you own the farm and you own the transportation. That is really a model that's used in Korea, where they own that all the way to the commissary. We have a very fractured supply chain. It's pretty unique. It moves pretty quick, but it's still fractured. There's lots of handoffs. Brokers buy and sell things while product is moving.
Well, yeah, possession changes multiple times.
Right. So here's the really cool thing is, if we can digitize our food, put it in the cloud, and you find a hold somewhere, you will then know exactly where it's at. Maybe we don't have to make a big announcement, right?
Right.
For recall, because then the consumer, 56% of people will not buy your product under recall. Okay. 15% will never buy it again. My wife is one of those. Chipotle. Okay, I still go to Chipotle. She won't go to Chipotle. And interesting on that one is there was a $25 million fine for their challenges, but there's also a 3-year deferred criminal prosecution on top of that. So those are some of the things where the Department of Justice is getting involved in the nation's food supply chain.
To hold people accountable.
Correct. So because you can always manage a fine, for the next year and account for that in your P&L. But you can't do that for criminal prosecution.
So now it's got teeth.
It's got teeth. And FSMA 204 is their first attempt to modernize supply chain. But with that will bring benefits. So I told you $10 million average recall. That now changes. Now you can focus in exactly on what you need to call. You can stop it. So think about a scan. As you continually scanning through supply chain, and then you're able to pick that up and say hold for manufacture, wherever you're at. You can account for it and you feed that information.
Absolutely. What we see today, when there's just even a voluntary recall, that some of the product most of the time's already been purchased by the consumer.
Right.
And it may be on taste or flavor or somewhere where they weren't happy with it. They don't want it going out because it doesn't meet their goal standard, and you can appreciate that. But in that, there's not a public knowledge in those scenarios,
right? Because
it's voluntarily done and it's not for because it's going to make somebody sick or cause somebody an issue.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the food supply chain is really hard about self-policing. They want to make sure they get that. Actually, when FSMA rules actually passed, food recalls went up because of self-reporting, like you're saying.
Right.
I think that this can be a benefit to supply chain. So think about a world, we're using some interesting technology like RFID, where you don't need line of sight or you don't need to engage the product directly. It can pass through a portal. So think about yourself walking through the Home Depot or a retail establishment, and it goes off and it says, hey John, can I check your receipt, please? Okay. What we can now do is that we can put portals on the back of docks, and then as it goes through the back, I can tell you exactly what's on that trailer to the case level. And think about one of the organizations in food distribution reports a 94% perfect pick ratio, but only an 82% perfect delivery in another area of their report. Why am I losing 12%?
Yeah, where to go?
Right, where to go? So when you pick and you're licking and sticking on a box, maybe you put 2 labels on 1 box, okay? And so the computer thinks I've got 2 of something going when you only got 1. And so, but that's a point of contention. So think about a world in which you use technology like this to be able to get less expensive labor. Somebody would be happy to get paid for, because warehousing is a tough job, just like trucking. They're trying to keep people there.
Well, yeah, manpower, especially if there's a lot of picking involved.
And you're in a cold storage warehouse.
All day,
Yes.
all evening, all
Yes.
night, depending on what shift you're on.
Correct.
Dressed like the Michelin Man.
Right.
It's
Sounds like you've been there.
been in quite a few of them.
Okay.
And I think that the manpower issue is real for everyone,
Yeah.
right? I mean, when all jobs are hard to hire for and unemployment rates are really, really low, that particular one is going to be a special. You've got to find the right person.
So if I can get less skilled people that would be motivated to come to work every day, but then I can increase my pick ratio or accuracy of the data that's going on the vehicle, and then, as you well know, that they're incentivized to be able,
Absolutely.
hey, you know what, if you hit a certain pick ratio, you'll get a bonus.
Absolutely.
And those type of things.
Sure.
That's wonderful. Well, Don, I just appreciate you taking the time to share with us what you're seeing and what you've learned and what you've read, and I think a lot of people will be surprised because they may be up to speed with where we were a year or 2 ago,
Right.
but it's time to up the ante.
Yeah, I'll leave you with this: is that as food travels down on the 204 rule and enhanced traceability for certain foods, they'll eventually go. I mean, you can't really designate. We're eventually going to have to do everything. But as food travels on the supply chain, this is also going to impact not just the distribution, but the restaurant and the C-store and the grocery chain that's going to ingest that. When they receive it, so let's say I go
Can you
to
imagine a convenience store?
Oh yeah, a peanut butter cracker, you'll have to have full traceability. And that will be required to have 2 years in that store for recall on a sortable spreadsheet from FDA within 24 hours. And that goes to just a hamburger at a mom and pop's.
What about Buc-ee's?
Oh yeah. Don't mess with Buc-ee's. Let me tell you something.
Yeah, between Buc-ee's and Sheetz and
Yes.
Casey's.
yeah, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah. If you have a hamburger with lettuce, cheese, and tomato, the lettuce, cheese, and tomato have to be kept in that on a sortable spreadsheet, lot code number
Repository for 2 years.
for 2 years. Now, I don't know anybody that's actually doing that now. In 2026, January is coming up soon.
Is there a phase-in period, or is
No.
is it just a big bang?
That is a super good question. That's one thing we asked is, why didn't we do this do all the manufacturers and food producers, they put this on, they collect the data. 2 years later, you come in maybe with the first warehouse or something like that, and then 2 more years later,
You
you come.
expand.
Yeah, government's never really done rip the Band-Aid off like this before.
Yeah, wow.
So there's not a phasing, but that's a really good question.
Wow.
I mean, the complexity of this is it's mind-boggling, and
This is going to be a lot for a lot of people to understand and navigate.
It will be. But it keeps me employed.
Well, we all got to do something,
We're all
right?
going to do something. Somebody's going to bring the bad news.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to share with us,
Well, thanks for having me.
and you're welcome back on anytime. Thanks for being part of our podcast here at FSA 24. Everyone.
It'd be good to get updates from Don.
Don.
6 months from now, has
Sure.
anything changed? Has the government come out with another ruling or something, or an addendum?
No, here's the thing. It's just like the FSMA rules were actually signed. The original ones were signed back in 2011 by President Obama. What happened was they didn't come forward.
Okay.
So public action groups sued individuals in the government. And then from that, then the court said you have to mandate these coming out. So the 204 rule, it's actually law of the land. They just chose not to enforce it for 3 years. So this has been around for a little while.
Okay.
What could the government do? Maybe choose not to enforce it for another year or not, but I don't see that.
Okay. Wow.
Not if there's revenue attached to enforcing it.
This is definitely the big bang coming up. The government.
Well, I think too is we have to be mindful that it's not just revenue anymore; it's criminal offenses. And I'm not saying that they put good people that are trying to do the good things.
I'm not going to say they're going to put people in jail for not having it done by then, but they might fine them.
Well, I think, I think that they'll make examples,
Yes, with a fine.
and that's what they've done with some of the companies we talked about.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Don, we'd love to hear from you again. We'll
Sure.
follow this together. And until then, stay in your lane.
I'll be in the lane.